Good Sunday morning and welcome to Inside Tennessee along with my colleague John North. I'm John Becker. We are moderating this Inside Tennessee about a new statewide poll. We'll get to that in just a minute. Let me introduce our panel first. On my left is Don Bosch, who's a Democrat and a lawyer. Good to have you.
Good morning.
Next to him is Eddie Smith, a former state representative and also a Republican.
Good morning. Thank you for having me back.
Absolutely. Good to have you back. And joining us via Zoom tonight is Mark Cunningham of the Beacon Center of Tennessee. And Mark is here to break down a new poll by this nonprofit, nonpartisan group that is based in Nashville. Mark, it's great to have you with us on this Sunday morning. And let's talk about the reason that you wanted a statewide poll. And you told John North and me it was because we haven't seen one like this in a long time.
Yeah, I mean, guys, I appreciate being on the show. There really just is not a very good, consistent statewide poll in Tennessee. It's really hard to tell where voters stand. And, these are major issues that there's just kind of this gap that needs to be filled. So, we're involved in a lot of policy, politics, and I thought it was a really great opportunity for us to kind of see where Tennessee voters actually stand on the issues that are most important. So that's why we decided to do this poll.
John North, you wanted to point out as well the survey sample size. To some, 1,100 plus doesn't sound like a lot, but it is.
Right, yeah, and I think it's good for the audience to understand, because some people are sitting home going, 1,100 people, that's nothing. That can't be any kind of a sample or a decent measure. Can you clarify for us, Mark, how this works and why, with scientific methods, you all can feel good with a good sort of margin for error with 1,100 and how it was done?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, 1,100 for a statewide sample size is a really, really big number. There's a lot of polls who do 500, 600. So 1,100 is about as good as you can get for that. And we had a really great pollster who weights the data according to what we have. So, if there's a lot of people from West Tennessee or a lot of Democrats in one area, they weight the data to make sure it looks like the state. So what is really cool about this poll that no other poll in the state does is that this really is very representative of the state we live in terms of geographics, in terms of demographics, and in terms of party affiliation. So it really is an excellent poll, and no matter what side you're on, there is some good things for you in this poll, but there's a lot of really interesting discussion points that came out of our first survey.
I was going to say, real quick, Mark, one other thing I wanted to just sort of clarify, if you could, is some people would look at the Beacon Center and say, oh, we know how you are. We know what your stance is. Can you clarify that as well? Because some people maybe when it came out, their reaction was, oh, well, we know what their philosophy is.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great question. It's something we have to answer. So the one thing that we did with this poll that was so important is that we have full transparency. You can see every question we asked. You can see the audience that we polled. In today's Twitter, which we had about 1 million mentions, we have people calling us socialists, people calling us Tea Party people. So ultimately, the fact is that we just ask questions and get the results of the audience. We used a pollster who is completely nonpartisan. On 538, which ranks pollster, he actually got a Democrat plus 0.3, which is as close down the middle as you can be. So ultimately, we say the proof is in the pudding. We're putting it all out there for you. And anybody who understands polling can see that the questions were worded fairly and that the demographics taken were exactly similar to what the state looks like.
Let's dive into some of the results, and let's look first at the major candidates for both parties. We can start with graphic number 1 right now, and you see Joe Biden has a commanding lead over Robert Kennedy Jr. at 7%. Let's start with you, Mark. Did anything surprise you about those numbers?
Absolutely. That 26% not sure is really shocking coming from an incumbent sitting president right now. And when you see that number, that's a lot of people are not happy with the current candidates, because they know about Joe Biden. Robert F. Kennedy's not really gained a lot of exposure there. So that kind of opens up a path if somebody like Gavin Newsom were to get into the race, if there is a lane for him there. The one other thing that's noticeable is that for Joe Biden, 72% of men who wanted to vote in the Democratic primary choose Biden. Only 54% of Democratic women, though, have Joe Biden as the number one choice, with a lot of them being unsure. So there's a real gender breakdown in this one, and it's an interesting topic for discussion.
John?
Well, when I see that, the first thing that comes to mind is this poll's 2 years away from the election. So in your experience as a pollster, how accurate do you think this will be, come November of 2024?
Well, it's a snapshot in time. So, of course, we're talking about right now. Things could change drastically in 2 years. But as of this moment, we feel very comfortable with that. And what's interesting is on the Republican side, which we'll get to in a little bit, only 10% of these people seem undecided. So obviously, there's going to be probably more candidates that enter, some that probably exit. But right now, for a snapshot in time, it's very accurate to where Democratic voters are in the state.
Let's move to that quickly because I want to get Eddie in before we have to take a break, and only about 45 seconds before we do. But let's show the major candidates on the Republican side, and you see Donald Trump with a commanding lead in Tennessee, and that is different from other states. We saw another poll out in Wisconsin, Eddie, this week that showed DeSantis with a big lead over Donald Trump. How do you explain this in Tennessee?
I think it goes back to, we've had President Trump once in office. A lot of the Republicans, especially with things that have happened since 2020, between January 6th, there's a lot of Republicans that aren't comfortable with how things went down, the falling out between Pence and Trump, and then a lot of the people who worked for Trump and the falling out there. So in the Republican side, I think it's still just a lot of mix up of what could happen. Again, but when you look at those numbers here in Tennessee, it looks like right now, as he said, this is a snapshot in time, as we said today, that President Trump would cruise to a Republican victory in the state. Again, a lot of things can happen between now and when we all go to vote next March for the presidential preference primary of what might actually happen on the Republican side.
We've got to take a quick break on Inside Tennessee. Back with our panel and also Mark Cunningham right after this on this Sunday morning.